Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the BlackUSA.News morning show. My name is Donnie Glover, publisher and dear friend to Marcia Jews. No, I don't get any special compensation for this. I do it out of the kindness of my heart. Do pick up a copy of Unapologetic. And we have a new book about to drop soon on Black Wall Street. Good morning, Marcia Jews. How are you?
Good morning. How are you today?
Blessed by the best. No need to be stressed. What is that above your head?
That's my kalimba. It was made by none other than Tom Miller. And if you look to my right, that is a doll that he made. It's a chair by Tom Miller. And we did a big reception for Tom Miller. Tom Miller was a world-renowned artist, but he was from Baltimore and everybody loved him and he was involved in everything. And he's just brilliant. And he has these incredible murals all over the city. And so he was a good friend. And that kalimba was really fabulous. But the chair, it's called the Miss Marcia chair. And it's a chair. I don't know if you can see it. It's a chair from when I was a little girl. I don't know what happened to the other three. There were four, but now there's only one. And he said he was transforming furniture. And he took that, and I talked to him about when I was a little girl and the things that I like. So on the shoulder, you'll see a tulip. And my mom and I had a tulip garden. And the little curls, the little knots around the face where my hair is curly, and my mother used to put me in these little dumb curls, right? And then the little hat, I had to wear a hat to Sunday school. Every Sunday I had to put a hat on to go to Sunday school.
Did it match?
Oh, of course, because Pauline did that. And then the
So
little bow.
You were like
a little doll. She could dress up and put the little bow on and the little hat on and the little curls around the head and the little shoes. And then he made a heart. And he said, because I have a big heart. And he put that in there. Oh, and then there's a ladybug, because the ladybugs were always on the tulips in our tulip garden. And there was a cardinal in front of the conifer, in front of my house in the conifer tree that I could see out of my bedroom window. And so that's a Miss Marcia chair from Tom Miller.
Okay, so is this what we have to look forward to when you miss a couple of days, a 3-minute introduction?
Oh, not necessarily, but it depends on how I feel. How are you, Zeke Cohen?
I'm doing great. Doing really well. I do not have a Tom chair in my house.
No, you should have a Tom table, or did you ever get to meet him?
I should have a Tom table, but I do have a triptych with a bunch of birds behind me. So.
I see it, and it's fabulous. I love it. So
yeah,
are crows?
You know, everybody sort of interpretation. Yeah, see, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's ravens." Other people are like, "It's something from his childhood." Other people, it's like
she's
like
not
wherever you're at psychologically, it is what it is.
She's not a Ravens fan.
Is that right?
I know this because she calls me as soon as the game comes on.
Well, look,
see, Ravens fan, we have this, you don't call people in the middle of it.
Yeah, that time is sacrosanct.
Why not? Anyway, so you've been up to a lot, Zeke Cohen. Tell us what you've been up to.
Yeah, so, a few things.
Can I just interject?
Please.
She has been waiting for you ever since we booked this date. That's all she has talked about is Zeke Cohen.
That's way too kind. So, I think the reason Donnie had reached out originally was some advocacy that we are taking around Comcast. So, look, we know Baltimore is a city with a significant digital divide. There was a study in 2018 that found that 40% of families in our city lack access to home wireline internet. And as you can imagine, the overwhelming majority of those families fell in majority Black neighborhoods. So this is a product of redlining. It's a product of racial inequity. We're also a city that has a franchise agreement with Comcast. It was signed in 2016 before me and some of my colleagues got into city council, but it gives them 10 years of access to our right-of-way. It gives them access to our conduit. And Comcast is a company that has done exceedingly well during this pandemic, right? They've had their best quarterly earnings ever. They've had millions of new subscribers, given that everybody is on the internet constantly. Their TV affiliate Peacock is doing really, really well. So Comcast is, unlike the rest of us, not hurting at all, and has done especially well here in Baltimore, where they are largely the only option. And they don't like it when I or other people use this term, but they really do have virtually a monopoly in our city.
Yep.
Now, I want to be clear, to be fair, that other folks could come into the market. The city has tried to woo Verizon and Google at times, but it's unlikely given the dominance of Comcast and given that they have the franchise and so on and so forth. And so my minimum expectation for them is that they at least be a good neighbor and a good partner to the city where they have financially profited so very well. So it really beginning a pandemic where young people, parents, teachers start reaching out and saying, hey, Zeke, we got this major problem, which is our schools are now completely virtual. And one, people don't have home wireline internet, so that's a problem. And two, Comcast has this really dinky program called Internet Essentials, which is $10 a month and is really substandard internet. It is the FCC's bare minimum speeds. It's 25 megabits and 3 megabits. And so what I start hearing from children especially is, look, I can't even stay on Google Classrooms or Zoom because I get bounced off every time because the Internet Essentials isn't fast enough to keep me connected. Especially, we know, Marcia and Donnie, that we have multi-generational families in Baltimore. We have families where we have not just one child, but 2, 3, 4, 5 siblings living in a home, and everybody is online right now. So it's a situation where that 25 and 3 goes very, very, very quickly. And so in addition to the city council itself passing a bill that I sponsored to bring $3 million to buy Chromebooks and support our kids in the pandemic so that everybody can at least have a device to be online, we also start reaching out to Comcast to say, look, it's a situation where we're in a global pandemic. This is a once in a lifetime issue. Why don't you, one, provide free Wi-Fi to families that need it? Because we know that $10, while it seems small to a family that's on the margin, that's struggling to pay their bills as it is, we're in a pandemic, that $10 can put someone over the edge. That can cost them their home or tax sale or whatever. So why don't you just let that go for the time being while we're in the state of emergency for the families that need it? And why don't you bump up the minimum speeds so that we can keep our people online and not be getting them kicked out of their classrooms? And mind you, this is coming from students, a group called Somos, young people from City College. A whole bunch of young people are saying really, really clearly that this is not working for us. It's not, your product is not good enough. And we understand that your motive is profit, but you've already done really, really well by our city. So why don't you, for the time being, let it go? Instead of doing that, Comcast hands a $650,000 bill to the Baltimore City public school system. And essentially it's a ransom because they say, if you don't pay, we will cut off all of these families who, by the way, are relying on our substandard product to get a free public education, right? I mean, kids in Maryland, by our state's constitution, are supposed to be guaranteed an education. Comcast says to Baltimore City schools, if you don't pay us, we're cutting off your students. which is outrageous.
The whole thing is outrageous in 2021 that we're having this conversation. I need to tell you this. The East Baltimore Historical Libraries, we finally did the groundbreaking the other day, and with Hattie Harrison and the bond bill that she had set up for this. I called Michael, one of the executive members, because I'd had so many problems. I was now calling the chairman of the board and the CEO of Comcast, right? And they gave me him for something else with my own house.
Right.
And I said to them, you should donate all of the connectivity in the library, because we're right in this Hopkins footprint that where all the 200 houses were. Anyway, that's another conversation. And he said, oh, well, we can certainly donate for your building. And, maybe what we can do is that $9.99 for the neighbors and the families that are in the neighborhood. And my conversation was similar to yours. I said, people take that $9.99 and they go get food. They have to go pay an electric bill, or they have to try to figure out how they're going to deal with the basic minimum in their household.
That's right.
And so when you sit down and you listen to that, and I went off, and I don't know, you don't know me that well, Zeke, but I was not in control at that point. And it unnerved me when we sit down, and I've had this conversation starting with Sheila Dixon when she was the mayor. And at that time, I was up at Columbia University at the Institute for Learning Technology and the Institute for Urban and Minority Education. And we were doing community technology development. This was in 1999, 2000. That's 20 years ago, right? And in those conversations, we were talking about high-speed networks. We were doing all of that in Harlem. And so did not happen through there. We should have a whole infrastructure that should have been dealt with.
That's right.
We were introduced. Have you ever heard of the Intelligent Community Forum?
No.
I've sent that information to everybody that's ever been a mayor, except for Brandon. I haven't sent it to him. In that, there is the Intelligent, I want you to go there, the Intelligent Community Forum. They travel around the world looking at the best high-speed networks where countries and cities around the world are deploying free internet access or minimal internet access to communities. And I've said this before, whoever the engineer, the guy who was over engineering, Frank something Johnson or whatever his name was, that used to be over IT for the city. I took it to him. Go look at this. Call these people. I had them on my show when I was on WEAA. I've known these guys for 20 years. Go talk to them. See what we can do. I remember one instance in LaGrange, Georgia. And this is old. This is old information. Small town, though, so you got to keep that in mind. The mayor took back the pipes. As much as we dig in the holes and dig the same hole 12 times in my neighborhood, he took back the pipes. He put down broadband in the pipes and delivered free access to all of the citizens of LaGrange, Georgia. That's just one. If you go up there, they have years of these stories of these communities that are giving access to the citizens who pay taxes, who support, who live in a city. And that this is 2021 and we can't have these conversations, that we're not thinking outside the box, that we're not looking at, this is not a gift that they're giving us. And why can't we just get rid of that contract and say, you're not doing what the conversation should have been, and we're going to take this contract back, we're going to exclude it, and we're going to start all over, we're going to do a bid process. Why can't we do that?
Look, and that is exactly
let me step in. So Councilman, they always say you get what you negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
So initially, we didn't negotiate this. We didn't negotiate, ample internet speed for our young people, for everybody. I'm asking, did we not negotiate this?
No, I mean, look, I've said this publicly. I'll say this on your show and anyone else. I think the franchise agreement that we signed was a really bad one for Baltimore. I think, and I actually asked Marcia, the solicitor, the new solicitor, Mr. Shea, yesterday. Is there room? Like, what would the consequences of leaving that contract, that franchise agreement, be for our city? Because I'll tell you, we held a hearing maybe 4 or 5 months ago where I made some very basic data requests of Comcast. I wanted street level. I want to know who has internet, who doesn't,
Right.
what the quality is, which neighborhood, does Sandtown, does blah, blah, blah. They refused to give it to me. And to me, that in and of itself is a breach of their franchise, their contract, right? Like, written in there even is that they have to produce data sets. And they argue, well, we're not going to go all the way down to street level. We'll give you like citywide. You'll get a picture of it. But again, they are not transparent. We haven't even gotten to data caps, which is the most predatory, just embarrassing that you would think that's acceptable in a global pandemic. But I would just say, no, Donnie, I do not think this was a well thought out contract for the city of Baltimore. Again, I wasn't there at the time. This was under Mayor Rawlings Blake. But I just think that when we make big deals with big corporations like Comcast, the city has a bad history of getting hosed. And I think that's what happened. And it's funny because, go ahead. I was just going to say last point, and then I want to get back to how bad Comcast is. But across the city, across race, socioeconomic spectra, everybody hates them. Like, there's no constituency out there that's like, you know what, like, they've done right in my house. I've got great internet. It's not that expensive. Every single person in Baltimore, whether you are rich, poor, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, yellow, green, purple, everybody hates this company because of the way they have consistently expropriated resources from us and squeezed the maximum amount of dollars out and given us substandard service. So I just feel like part of my job is to consistently call them out publicly, and try to figure out ways to, one, see if we can get out of our contract, and two, like in the case of data caps, call up the attorney general and say, this is price gouging and we should be investigating them.
Mm-hmm.
So what did the solicitor say? So
the solicitor said he's going to look into it. He's obviously been on the job for 2 weeks. He was like, that's a good question, Councilman. Let me do some research. Let me get back to you. So I take him at his word and we'll see. Again, I don't know whether, that is a Zeke Cohen question. I don't know whether that's what the administration would want to do. But back to Marcia's point, I just fundamentally believe we need to start thinking of internet as a public utility.
Correct.
That it is in the same way that rural electrification in the 1940s was critical to how people lived, right? Like, you had places in Cotulla, Texas that were completely dark, where the roads weren't paved, where you couldn't function. That is and then you had FDR come in and bring electricity to most of the country. That is the same kind of urgency that we need around the internet. And it really does need to start with the federal government, with the FCC, with Biden, with Congress. They need to be on the hook for this because it's not, it's asymmetric warfare. If you have
option.
Right. If you have cities individually negotiating with mega corporations like Comcast, we are going to lose every time. And I'll tell you, it's not just Baltimore, it's Philly, it's Detroit, it's all the places.
The Benjamins and rural.
Yes. Oh yeah. And rural, it's even worse. So I just feel like the moral, ethical, economic imperative for the Biden administration, for the country right now, is to figure out the internet as a public utility, whether that's municipal broadband, like you were talking about in Georgia, whether that's an overarching thing that the FCC does, where Congress allocates money toward it. Like, it just should not be a question in 2021 while we're in a global pandemic where this conversation and every other conversation we're having is on Zoom or StreamYard or whatever, it should not be a question that people should have access to the internet.
Right. At all.
Have you ever thought about that if it weren't for the pandemic, we would not be addressing this issue?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's real. I mean, look, there are people who have been in this fight and in this conversation before the pandemic. I'm embarrassed to say I was not one of them. Like, this has never been.
But you're here now.
I'm here now. But this is, until we got into a situation where kids literally couldn't get a public education without the internet. Honestly, this was not so much on my radar. In 2018, when they did that study, that should have tipped us off to say, this is horrific. We need to fix it. But here we are in a crisis, in a global pandemic, and the imperative is now.
And so, Councilman, when we sit down and look at this, these children who do not have the access, they can't get the connectivity, they can't do their work. What happens to them? So now they've lost a whole year of school. What do we do about that? How do we manage that?
And who do we hold accountable?
Yeah. So look, I think in terms of accountability, it's on all of us. It's on decision makers, policymakers. I mean, that's why I've been fighting every single day since the start of this thing to get Chromebooks, to go after Comcast and so on, because I think at the end of the day, it's our city, it's our children, and we need to take responsibility. But two is, I really do think in this situation, the city's franchise with Comcast makes them liable to at least be a credible, decent partner. To your question, Marcia, yeah, it is a real problem. Many of our kids, even kids who are some of our better students who want to be in the classroom, who aren't, disengaged from school, have really, really suffered during this pandemic purely because of their financial circumstances and the fact that their family either can't afford high quality internet or is struggling to even pay Comcast its $10. And the one other thing I want to say, because I got a lot with Comcast, is I remember sitting in a meeting with a regional vice president and a couple of students, and the students saying to the vice president, look, this is not working for us. The speed is simply not fast enough for us to be able to function on Zoom or Google Classroom. It freezes up every single time, and it just isn't working. And the executive looked at them and said, essentially, you're either lying or confused, because we've done speed tests and I asked her, are you using Internet Essentials? And of course not. What we later found out from a whistleblower who left the company was that the product of Internet Essentials, according to him, this is someone who worked there, is not fast enough to sustain Zoom or Google Classrooms. And the reason he left Comcast is he said, I couldn't live with myself hawking this product that is insufficient, that is unwieldy and unmanageable. I couldn't go to sleep at night knowing that I'm telling families across the United States that this is a solution when it's not.
Zeke, I live in East Baltimore and I don't have essentials. I'm paying $100-something a month, and the speed kept stopping. It kept stopping. It would freeze, and that's a normal thing. So we had to get the little white box with the wire to go across the wall, over the thing, come in here to plug it into my laptop for me to be able to have, and I'm paying $100 and something, almost $200 a month. So that is Comcast.
That's
and
right.
I want you to know that I'm your warrior.
I appreciate it. And look, same situation. I got the little Eros extender. I think it cost me $350 to get a little extender piece because my Comcast, and I'm paying similar to you, $130 something a month, wasn't fast enough.
No.
It was constantly crashing. And again,
you're paying top dollar for an inferior product that there should be no question about Internet Essentials, right?
Right.
Correct.
If your premium customers
Right.
are getting quality service, then you know the customers paying $10 a month are not getting it at all.
Don't get me
Correct.
started. Don't get me started. I'm
Correct.
telling you, we had to get a box, put it up on the side on the ledge. I'm gonna take a picture and send it to you.
So, Councilman, if you didn't have $350, you could be missing Zoom calls for work.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
I could not be doing this right now.
That's right.
I got a wire. I got a wire. Here's a wire. Here's the wire.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. And so, let me just say, so ultimately when this whistleblower came out, we kept putting pressure on them, and they did finally double the speeds of Internet Essentials, which to my mind is not a win for Comcast. It is a win for students who publicly humiliated them enough times that they, at that point, had to do something.
And it's still not fast enough.
So when does that contract come up for renewal?
2026.
4 years from now. 5 years from now. I still say that Jim Shea needs to be looking at that contract and canceling it out with this provision. This is what we want, period, the end, and sue them. For real, this is ridiculous. And then, and every citizen in this city, and it doesn't even have to do anymore. We don't even talk about the people who cannot afford normal connectivity or just even the essentials. We should all be suing Comcast. Every individual, every household should be suing and do a class action suit against Comcast. That's where I am.
When is the contract over?
Say again.
When does the contract end?
2026.
That's too long.
Right. That's what I'm saying. In the meantime, Zeke, I want you to...
Stephanie Wallace-Blake negotiated this. We need to sue her.
Well, I think you need to see. You probably get sued Comcast. That's what you need to do, and do a class action suit as well. That's what needs to be happening. This is ridiculous. And you could probably do it in concert with Philadelphia and a whole bunch of other places, that you could do it all as one.
Mm-hmm.
Councilman, there's a historic rap line that says, if your girl starts acting up, then you take her friend. So what about another company? If they don't act right, can't we go somewhere else?
So that is the hope. And thank you for quoting Wyclef this early in the morning.
And that you even knew that it was Wyclef, because I didn't. So thank you, Councilman. You on top of it. That's cool.
The carnival. Look, I think a few things. One is that I do think we need competition in the marketplace. I think the city should be doing everything in its power. And I know that Mayor Scott and his team are working aggressively to try to bring other folks into the marketplace, whether it's Verizon, whether it's Google, whether it's some of the alternative ones. We should be working really hard to introduce competition, just to make our current incumbent less secure in their terrible ways. Number two is that I think, to Marcia's point, we should be really thinking ourselves about what municipal broadband would look like in Baltimore. Because why can't we be like Chattanooga, Tennessee, or the place that you named in Georgia, where we start to build out our own infrastructure?
Right.
Like we have our own conduit. We have the holes in the ground, to your point. So if we're a forward-thinking city, yes, there is an initial cost. And yes, financially, we're in a rough spot right now, given the pandemic. But to me, it would be money well spent for Baltimore to really invest in this infrastructure. And it's just like any other infrastructure. It's like roads. It's like, you can't live. Internet is essential. I mean, the Comcast at least has the messaging right? Like you can't live without it. And so to me, to allow a bully like Comcast to run roughshod over our city is just strategically not the right place to be.
That's right.
I want to say one more thing about what they've done recently that frustrates me, which is they introduced what are called data caps, which is this idea that if you hit 1.2 terabits worth of data, that you have to pay additional fees beyond what you're already paying, which was not part of the contract that you or I signed, but they just arbitrarily decided this is an opportunity for us to make more money. They call them, the people that are using 1.2 terabits, they're super users. And so we're going to upcharge them up to another $100 per month. That is, to me, the most outrageous, predatory, price gougingist behavior, given that, once again, we're in a global pandemic where everybody is using the internet.
So why isn't our IT department, they know that, why aren't they having a conversation with Comcast about this? Why haven't they brought the city solicitor to that conversation right now? Why is that not happening?
Nobody said anything before you. Nobody said anything before you.
So to be clear, it was myself, Councilmember Dorsey, Councilmember Burnett, all wrote to the Attorney General and said, we want an investigation into this because we believe it constitutes price gouging. Price gouging is the idea that in like a shortage situation, when you're in a pandemic, when you're in, like, if there's an oil shortage or something, that's when individuals up their prices because they have a captive market and people have no alternative. Right. This is classic price gouging. And when we did that, Comcast backed off a little bit and said, all right, we're going to, they were planning on doing it in March. They said, all right, we're going to extend it to August. We said, that's simply not good enough. We want the data caps gone. They also fudged their data because they said initially, they said this will only impact 5% of the city. That's what we believe.
That's a lie.
Which is a lie. The Sun called them up, Colin Campbell from the Sun, and was like, where do you get that 5% number? What's that based on? They said, well, actually, we're going to retract that. We're not sure what the actual number would be, but we believe it's a small percentage of our users. Look, I don't care if it's 5%, 25%, or 5 people. It's unacceptable.
It's not in the contract.
No one should be paying more than their contract. Like, because you use more internet, that's not how the contract worked. When I signed up with Comcast, when Marcia, you did, we didn't say, okay, but at some later date, you might determine that we're using too much internet, so you're going to charge us more money. That doesn't logically make sense. So
at all.
We asked Frosh to go and investigate whether this constitutes price gouging, whether we can bring any kind of criminal suit against them, because.
And what did he say?
Again, him and his team are looking into it. To their credit, they got right back to us. They were like, look, we got to look at the statute. We want to do this right. But again, I take him and his folks at their word that they're going to give it a hard look.
So is there some sort of timeline of who's doing what, when, and what the goal is and what the end game is?
Because, Councilman, I'm hearing violins.
I mean,
oh, by the way, on the music tip, if your girl starts acting up, that comes from what many of us call the first rap song, Rapper's Delight, Sugar Hill Gang.
I guess Wyclef sampled it and used it because it was anyway.
What?
Can we get all of the cities in the country that have Comcast problems to come together for a massive lawsuit? The only way people understand these days is their pockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I will say, and I don't want to preempt anything, but we've been in conversations with folks from Philadelphia, which is where their headquarters are, and they feel similarly, or at least my colleague, friend, Councilwoman Helen Gim, feels like even in Philadelphia, where they're headquartered, where they've gotten one of these deals, she still feels like they're extremely predatory. Right. And Philadelphia has gotten screwed by Comcast. So we've talked, we held a national press conference. Detroit was there. We had some folks from rural jurisdictions. I do think there could be a situation where you get into some kind of class action suit. I do also think that, again, the federal government really needs to step in. It shouldn't be on individual cities because this is a national federal problem. And so to kind of like triangulate and have us in Baltimore be battling, us in Philly be battling, all of these little cities, again, it's asymmetric warfare. They've got.
You know who would be good? That would be the Congressional Black Caucus. And Kwesi used to be the chair, and he's over there now.
Have we talked to him?
I have not talked to him, but we should. I've talked a little bit to the folks at the FCC, but I think
you should talk to the Congressional Black Caucus, because what you're talking about are cities that are majority minority, and the dollars are going to be coming out of there. And so if I were it me, I would be in touch with them and having a conversation with all of them, because all of those neighborhoods are going to be impacted because of the percentage of minorities.
Right.
So years ago, Comcast also promised the city of Baltimore, and I'm going back to the mid-90s, cable access, television, public access. Does Baltimore still have a public access station?
So we have Charm TV.
Public access, it used to be a cop-in, and you could take a class, learn how to use the equipment, and produce your own television show.
I don't think we have that anymore.
So we got to go back to these contracts and see what was negotiated, what's outdated, what we now need to implement.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm wondering, does this carry over into other utility deals that we have for the city of Baltimore?
I mean, look, I always think that, again, we should be taking a very hard look at BG&E. We should be taking a very hard look at any of these sort of quasi public-ish utility players that are in the space that have done extremely well in our city. I always feel like Baltimore gets the raw end of the deal. My sincere hope and my belief with the Scott administration is that he is going to drive a harder bargain and hold people accountable. Because at the end of the day, these companies are not our friend. They've made it abundantly clear that they are not in it to be good neighbors, good negotiators with Baltimore. And so I feel like as a city, we got to do a better job of holding the line and not taking, cutesy little handout, whatever it is. I mean, I also think, look, I'll just be honest. I think there's an issue with companies giving money to politicians. I think some of this is about campaign finance reform. Like, I think that every single person in this city, whether they're on the city council or whether they're just in a neighborhood, should assume an adversarial posture with Comcast, because they've been adversarial. They've been terrible. If they weren't bad to us, then, this would be a different conversation, but they have been.
So who took Comcast money?
I have no idea. I'm not for me to judge.
Did you?
No. All of that is public. I've made really clear I don't take their money. I don't take little Wheelabrator, the incinerator people. I used to teach in Curtis Bay, where half the people down there have some form of cancer or some form of lung disease. I don't take any of their money. There are just some folks in this town who I just think it's a bad symbiosis where money is flowing in both directions. And I think we should really avoid that. That's why, I'm excited about my colleague, Councilman Burnett, has been trying to get public financing in Baltimore. I think the more we can do to disentangle from some of the relationships that I think exist between companies like Comcast and the political class in our town, I think it's better for the people that live here.
Where's the Maryland General Assembly on this, since we're in the middle of the assembly?
So I know that Delegate Learman and I forget who she cross-filed with, someone in the Senate had introduced a bill. So Governor Hogan has the Office of Rural Broadband, Delegate Learman introduced the bill that would extend the state to be the state office of rural and urban broadband, because frankly, the state governor, like our governor, hasn't been active enough in this conversation. The state.
Have you talked to him?
Have I talked to him? No, I haven't talked to him. I've talked to our attorney general when I've asked for an investigation, but I haven't talked to.
Maybe you should talk to the governor.
Yeah.
I think you should put together a list of the 5 top things that you need to do and who you need to call, and then put together a team of people from a federal, state, and local level. And however I can help you, I'd be more than happy. This is a war I'd love to continue to fight.
I got a question, and I'm not the tech guy, but when will Baltimore get FiOS? I have to move to Baltimore County to get FiOS. Is it like Baltimore is?
They have a, what do you call it? They have an exclusive.
Well, no. So again, I want to be clear that while Comcast is the dominant player in the market, there is no reason that a FiOS, a Google, or any other ISP couldn't come in. However, because Comcast has the right of way, because they have the conduit, it makes it much, much more difficult. So
don't they have to rent that space to put their equipment in those pipes? And they're not going to do it in an affordable manner. They're going to take the price way up so that they can't compete.
But they're going to be coming back for renewal in 2026, right?
In the meantime, kids can't get on the internet. In the
So
meantime,
we have
can't do our
4 years of no learning.
Well, look, that's why I think there's a long game and there's a short game. The short game to me is we better figure out immediately whether it's municipal broadband, whether it's, we have these things called mesh networks. There's this group called Project Waves, and there's another one in West Baltimore that essentially leverage churches, schools, like public buildings, and bang out internet into the surrounding communities. Right. They do it for free. They're nonprofits. They are at a tremendous disadvantage to Comcast. But to me, that would be good public investment. Let's expand their product.
And
right?
so the same people that I was working with up at Columbia, they have a mesh network system, and they've been trying to talk to the city, but I don't know what actually happened. We should have it offline because I'll go on and on about this, but there are several other things that we should probably be talking about because this needs to change immediately. And you're right, there's a short term, there's a mid and a long range plan, but we've got to make something happen because this is like the Twilight Zone.
This was before your era, so we got some comments on the side. One was brought up that it all started with Councilman Ken Harris, the city councilman that was murdered. I remember he was working for Comcast. Kevin Brown chimes in, great suggestion, Marsha, CBC. Nicole Orr, exactly, Zeke. Baltimore gets played because the leaders are self-serving. On YouTube, Paul Stanley says, look at your Comcast bill. It goes to the mayor. And they said money. Ken Harris held a high position in Comcast and sat on the council at the same time. Let's take it back. I'm not sure what power Councilman Harris, but I do remember back then it was around 2006, 2007. So we talked about FiOS, we talked about Comcast, we talked about other utilities, the deals coming up in 2026. What else are you working on, Councilman?
Yeah, so a lot of my work relates to trying to support young people, specifically around trauma. We passed first in the nation legislation, the Healing City Act, named after the late, great Elijah Cummings, who had been championing this at the federal level. And it really came from some young people who suffered a school shooting out there in West Baltimore at Frederick Douglass High School, and who came to us, came to a hearing and said, look, this city invests way too much in policing, and you all don't invest nearly enough in prevention. And they spoke about every adverse childhood experience in the book. They talked about homelessness. They talked about having a family member that's addicted to drugs. They talked about dealing with day-to-day environmental racism in the neighborhood, day-to-day violence. And they said, look, where's the plan? Where's the legislation on that? Why are you all so focused on BPD and whatever it's doing? Why aren't you investing more in us? And to me, as a former teacher, I took that message really seriously and spent about a year working on a bill with the young people and just trying to listen in libraries, in laundromats, in rec centers, in classrooms, trying to figure out how I, as a legislator, because that's my job, right? Like, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a clinician. My job is to make the laws for the city on the city council. So how could we make a law that would address childhood trauma? Right. Like I said, we spent about a year. At the time, my mentor and friend, Congressman Cummings, was leading the work nationally. He held the first ever congressional hearing on childhood trauma. And he really called on us in Baltimore and said, look, I'm not going to be here for that much longer. Right. Like, he knew he was dying at this point. The man had severe cancer for many, many, many years, and basically said, you all need to figure this out. You all need to pick up the torch and do something, because I'm sick and tired of the way our city and our country treats its children. And again, as someone who consider myself a follower of his and someone who knew his heart, I just felt called to the work. And so about a year ago, we held what we called our first ever Healing City Summit, where we were at the great Morgan State. We had about 350 children from around our city. They did poetry and panels and little TED Talks on healing from trauma. And then 2 days later, we went to Coppin State, where we had a big resource fair. We had barbers and beauticians giving out free haircuts. We had everyone from Roberta's house to all the different organizations in our city talking about their work. And then we all marched to Frederick Douglass, where the young people spoke about the importance of the bill that they had helped to write. And then Mayor Young signed it. To me, that was big, because it makes Baltimore the first in the country to comprehensively legislate trauma-informed care. And the other thing that we saw is that people from all different communities, all different walks of life, wanted to get involved and wanted to do it in a way where it's not the different silos, it's everybody trying to be at the same table. So a year later, we have our task force that was sworn in a couple of days ago. It's got clinicians, beauticians, educators, students, parents, returning citizens, all different forms of healers across Baltimore, whose goal and mission is to come up with a strategy to reduce childhood trauma. We started training city agencies. The mayor had all of his cabinet get trained. I got my colleagues on the council get trained in understanding the brain science and effective responses when we see trauma. And then the other piece of our legislation is that it calls for a review of every single policy and procedure with a lens toward reducing re-traumatization. So, like, we should not be doing things like the war on drugs that disproportionately harm Black and brown neighborhoods. We should think.
What does that mean, Councilman? Not to cut you off, but.
No, that's okay. So if we understand both the science and the impact of trauma and what it looks like, what it does, then we should know that addiction is a mental health issue and is not something that we should have sent everything but the National Guard into Sandtown, where I used to teach, to go eradicate drugs, because it didn't work. It criminalized people And it resulted in mass incarceration and devastation in Black and brown communities. We should treat things like drug use as pervasive mental health issues and attack them with every public health tool in the book. That's the kind of policy decision that we as a city seem to make again and again and again. You can put a lot of the blame on O'Malley. I think that's fair, but I think there's
for what, zero tolerance?
Yeah, for zero tolerance, for mass incarceration.
Thinking more about Ronald Wilson Reagan, Colonel Oliver North, who brought the crack into the community in the first place.
Bet. That's
in the U.S. government. So you got the government saying just say no on one hand, yet you got the U.S. military down in Panama bringing in pounds of cocaine. So, but I want to go back to your trauma piece, and I did cut you off. You know, in my neighborhood, all we want is a brand new wreck. I look down the road 45 minutes in Southeast DC, which some people would characterize back in the day as a tough neighborhood, Anacostia, but there's a rec betting park. The recreation center has nighttime lights for football. Our schools don't even have nighttime lights, or many of them, but these are recreation centers. And so we have, I don't know the last wreck. The newest wreck I remember as a child was Greater Model down there on Saratoga Street, but there's been no investment in recreation. And this is a new day. I know I'm old, but punishment for me was you can't go outside, which meant you can't go to the rec. Punishment today is you got to go outside and leave your devices in the house. But when are they going to just give us Prince George's County? Oh my God, Aisha Braveboy, when she was a delegate, I saw, might have been District 26, brand new recreation. And I mean, really big. Easterwood in Baltimore, Baker and Betlow. It's a little building. It's plenty of land. And I know it costs money, but these kids just want somewhere to go or something to do.
But Donnie, we've got a rec center right here at the end. We all going down Harford Road. There's swimming pools and everything, and I don't see anybody there. So there's no money or something where people can't be employed to help even run the centers or the pools that are available.
Councilman, back in the day, we used to have basketball leagues all year long.
Yeah, and look, if we're, again, thinking through a trauma-informed lens, we know that physical activity is key to healing, right? The more you move around, the more you engage, whether it's at a rec center, whether it's at a park.
Because you know we were traumatized, right?
Say again?
You know we were traumatized, adults growing up. We saw dead bodies.
Right. But
it's not new.
No, it's not new. It's not new. And again, like, I don't consider myself to be some pioneer for having come up with this. It's building on the work of lots and lots of people. But I do think that as we as a city progress, we got to think differently. We got to start using what we know from public health. And again, to your point, Donnie, I do think that the more parks, the more recreational activity, the more opportunity we have for our kids to move. Because the reality is that we are way too tethered to our phones all day long.
Right. And
that children, you know, my kids, I have a kid who's a couple months and a kid who's 3. I worry about them doing this, you know, with the iPad, and the little girl wants to watch Peppa Pig all day long. You know, there's a reality that children are being brought up on these devices, and that it's not healthy for their brains or their bodies. So again, I think that what you're saying is real, and that is an area that we need to invest more in.
And how do we get assistance? So, you know, we've come up with this plan, and you've talked about the trauma care, but are there community outlets where people can actually go and take their children, or they can go themselves to deal with somebody who's a professional to help navigate the trauma, help them navigate what their issues are? I mean, I don't know how that's going to be deployed. That would be interesting to hear.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that I think is a challenge within the sort of space in Baltimore is there's a couple of things. One is like lack of access, right? Like some people can't afford therapy. We have undocumented folks in my community who can't get therapy, who've experienced a lot of trauma.
And they can't report it to the police because they'll get extradited, like rapes, domestic violence, things of that nature.
Correct. So there's an access issue. And then also, if we're being really real about it, there's also a stigma issue. And there's a history, especially in East Baltimore, of Black people being pathologized and being treated as medical experiments for institutions like Hopkins. And so I think
you're the first one to ever hear say that.
I mean,
I've never heard that.
I say that as an alum. I got a degree from there, but I think it behooves us to be critical of the institution and acknowledge the ways in which, whether it's Henrietta Lacks, whether it's
So you understand why I don't trust these medical professionals. They got a history of medical sterilizations, stealing cells, making money off of it, Tuskegee experiments, and the like. You understand that?
Yeah. Look, I'll never forget being with our former mayor, Jack Young, who I often did not get along with. Like I had a falling out. We did not usually see eye to eye. I remember one time going and meeting with him at T-Volve and him saying to me, when it comes to Hopkins, there's a whole history that like you really don't understand.
Shit, he worked there.
What's that?
He worked there.
Correct.
His family worked there. So how is he going to be critical?
So he literally picked up the phone. So while we're talking, and I'm like, yeah, like I get it. He literally picks up the phone and he's like, Miss Harrison, I'm with the councilman. You need to tell him about Hopkins treated you. And he hands me the phone. And Miss Harrison is like, yeah, like they fired me and then they sued me for medical debt. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. And so then I hang up the phone and he's like, no. You need to hear from Mr. John. Mr. John, remember when Hopkins did you dirty? And he hands me the phone and on and on. And to me, again, Donnie, to your point, Jack worked there, Mary Young worked there for, I don't even know how long. And he just had this like deep, visceral distrust of the institution. And to me,
Why work there? You're co-signing it, working there. Look, and you're handcuffed because who's going to talk smack to the people paying your check?
I hear you. I hear you. And look,
when he gets mad, they tell me he's running around mad at everybody today. He's the one that got out there and says, I don't want to be mayor.
Again, I'm not going to sit here and we're young because
we need to accept responsibility for our actions. I do, Marsha does, you do, everybody does, because these children are watching and we're failing them with our chicanery.
I agree. And look, I would say the same on this show as I would to Ron Daniels, which is that your institution has a long history of perpetuating trauma or harm in Black and brown communities.
You know what my grandma said in 1950?
What she said?
Don't get caught around Hopkins because you'll end up in the experimental lab. 1950. Black people would not go to sleep anywhere around Hopkins. Like, get drunk and fall off to sleep. They said you'd end up in an experiment.
Look, and who am I to say that that's not a real experience? And I think that the challenge now is they are a world leader when it comes to COVID, when it comes to, all of their medical stuff. And again, my wife got trained there. She's a psychiatrist. I got my master's degree there. But it is critically important, I think, for those of us who are in positions of authority to also be clear and honest about the blood that they have on their hands.
Including Kennedy Krieger, right?
What's that?
Kennedy Krieger. They gave children lead, right?
So I don't know that history, but I wouldn't doubt it. I just know that many of the decisions that they've made, even in my relatively short time in Baltimore, have been counter to the community's that they reside in. And I think about EBDI. I think about the very rushed decision to try and get a private security force. I just think
like they were over in some Israel or the what do you call it on the line where they were over in the
Gaza Strip.
Yeah, God, I mean, are you kidding me? They look like warriors. They have enough going on them, like they are defending the whole country. And
remember that time we were going to New York?
Outrageous.
We were going to New York. I went to Marsha's house about 5 in the morning, went over to Hopkins to get a cup of coffee. They were on me like I robbed a bank.
It's outrageous.
Cars came up from everywhere. I'm like, damn, I just want a cup of coffee.
I used to set up military exhibits for the United States Marine Corps, and we brought in tanks and helicopters and shoulder missiles and all this stuff from around the world, right? There was an international pavilion, and Israel was there, right? Israel has a military program. The French have a military. This looked like an the way they look over there looks like a concentration of military militia protecting that house.
I think we need an investigation. We need a walkthrough. We need to see all of the hidden tunnels, all of the things in the basement. We want a tour.
So look, let me close because I got to jump onto another Zoom. But
thank you for joining us today.
But I would just say that, so again, back to the trauma, part of the challenge is that there is a stigma, there's a lived history, there's pathology that's gone on. And so a lot of it is about how do we get people resources in non-traditional ways. So like one of the things—
how traumatizing kids are right now without being able to do their schoolwork because financially their family cannot afford to do it.
Exactly.
That is trauma enough.
It is.
That they aren't good enough to be able to have it, and it is a disgrace.
That's right. And so the way we've thought about this is how do we get services through non-traditional providers, right? Folks like, I don't know if you all know Troy Stanton, who's a barber in West Baltimore. Yeah. Troy's got this thing, More Than a Shop, where he brings blood screenings, trauma-informed care, Narcan into the barbershops because folks feel comfortable in a barbershop. It's non-stigmatizing, it's non-pathologizing. So it's like non-traditional spaces, places that are not hospitals where people don't trust, places that are not government buildings where people don't trust. Those are the kind of places that we need to figure out how to strategically deploy services and get people connected in ways that are real and that honor their existence.
Baltimore City Councilman Zeke Cohen, we thank you for taking time out to speak with us this morning. You're a stand-up guy. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you both. Great being here. Happy to come back anytime.
Yes, sir. Woosa. Marsha, you want to hear some of these comments?
Okay.
People are glad that you're back. And by the way, Kavette Kane had a, well, she fell, and she'll be back shortly. She's recuperating. So get better, Kavette. We miss you. No, we don't. Okay.
Liar.
Okay. Nicole Orr said, I applaud Zeke for being informed, but some that sit on the council are questionable and self-serving. Hello, Andy Havas, all the way from Hungary. Nicole says, amen, Marsha. Here's from Bill Gooden. The war on drugs. Again, why is there no one witnessing the destruction of weapons and drugs? You know, Bill has been calling for that for well over 25 years.
Wow.
And again, Paul Stanley, look at your Comcast bill. It goes to the mayor, money. So, Marsha, we finally got this conversation with Zeke going. How'd you feel? I mean, I'm happy for you.
You know, this has been my passion for, I have to thank Bruce Lincoln, my passion for 21 years. And I think that where I am, it was really great to hear that he's championed this, but where we need to be is having the whole city council champion this, the mayor.
Just seems late, though. I mean,
it's late. It's late. It's 20 years late.
And I'm not blaming him. Yeah, I'm saying
it's 20. It's
very,
20
very
years.
late.
In 1998 or something like that, Larry Irving under Ron Brown at the Department of Commerce at the National Telecommunication Information Agency wrote the report called Falling Through the Net. It talks about, and he coined the phrase under Bill Clinton as president, the digital divide. That was the first report I read, and it made me so angry I could hardly breathe. And it was real. And this was 22 years ago, and we're in 2021, and we're having the same conversation. And anybody within the sound of my voice can go up on the doggone Google, look for Falling Through the Net by Larry Irving, and everything that's going on up there, you can read about it, and it's still happening today. And you go up on the Intelligent Community Forum, and you will learn about all these different countries and cities who are deploying, and I've been deploying high-speed networks around the world to people who cannot normally afford them. I have said this to every mayor since Sheila Dixon. Why are we still having this conversation? Sheila actually came up to the Institute for Learning Technology, and Robbie McClintock and Frank Moretti were sitting there, and they talked to her about it. This is not a joke. This is real. And I learned that back then up there. And here we are today, and it has realized itself that the whole country is shut down, and all the children that are being impacted are Black and brown children, and children who are financially insecure. And we think that that's okay. There's still people out here trying to party, and they don't wear the mask, but nobody's sitting there talking about how we going to get these kids so they can learn something. And how are we going to get these kids so they feel comfortable?
So I have a challenge, Marcia. Since there's a competition these days to see who can get the most followers.
What?
Yeah, on social media. You're on Clubhouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people on there with a whole bunch of followers, and I hear them late night talking about all kinds of things. We need these influencers to put their influence on issues like this.
Okay, so we'll talk offline, and we'll do a thing, and we'll give it a couple of days so that everybody can get marketing. Okay.
So, Mark, one last thing I wanted to tell you, thank you for your help on the Black USA virtual town hall, How to Better Support Black Business, Friday, February 26th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., streaming live right here on Facebook and YouTube. Guest speaker include Dr. Michael Carter, who is the president of Black Wall Street USA. We're also going to have a special Black Wall Street Awards. Honorees include Hannibal Johnson from Tulsa, Cynthia Boykins from Chicago, Pam Perry from Detroit, Tammy Terrell from Baltimore, Cheryl Smith from Texas, and Morocco Coleman all the way from Atlanta. So I want to thank you, Marcia, for all of your help in making this a reality. I'm very excited. Going to get some fresh shirts and maybe a new tie.
Oh my.
Speaking of which, how was your whole experience with Dr. Tyrone Taborn and Bea?
Oh, it is always so enlightening and refreshing to just be able to have conversations with people that look like us, that are doing incredible work across this nation. And one of our own from Baltimore was able to get an award as well. So, we sit down and we talk about all of the things that are going on, and it comes back to the reality of there are people who are doing their job. They're working hard, and they've made it through the ranks in spite of all the obstacles that people have thrown to them.
Tell me about one honoree, because I know you had like a zillion.
I had a whole bunch of them.
No. I don't want you to look. Who stands up in your mind without looking?
Without looking.
Kelsey Parker, of course. Think Black app.
Yeah. Kelsey Parker got on there and rocked the whole show.
Kelsey did good.
Kelsey created an app, and Donnie was gracious enough to introduce me to her, and we brought her in. First, she was able to attend the activities so she could see what it was all about.
So she made it.
She made it, and we got to interview her, and she was, I mean, you would have thought she was a grown woman. She was sitting there hitting each piece. This was her first time attending. She's 15. She's in high school. I see her doing a lot with Black Engineer of the Year. They were very impressed.
Why was it special to you?
It was special because you all introduced me to her. You introduced me to her. She's from Baltimore, and Quay is a good friend, her father.
But her, what's
she
special about her?
That she's so creative, and she has the ability to articulate a thought the way she wants to articulate the thought, not with the way you think. She already has a plan. She is strategic. She knows what she's going to do. She has other things coming up that she's interested in doing. And I just see her, she's got a path, and she's got support around her, but she's very independent in her thinking. She can articulate a thought. She is a thinker. You know, she's kind of quiet. You sit there, and then all of a sudden she can run off this whole litany of information. She has a capacity. She's a leader, and she's very comfortable being a leader and an entrepreneur.
Tell me about this morning show. This is 11 weeks.
Oh, is it?
I'm so glad you're back, because I thought I was going to have to change the graphic and put up my new correspondent from another continent that speaks no English whatsoever. But since we had put that on hold, we've had Diane Bell on this show. We've had Tim Adams, the mayor of Bowie, the mayor of Greenbelt, Colin Bird. We've had Councilman County Chair from Prince George's County, Calvin Hawkins. We've had Julian Jones, the chair out there in Baltimore County. We've had a number of panelists, including Attorney Bob DeShields. What do you think of this show? Have we been making an impact?
Yes, Donnie. I think that you're not going to get real raw information like you get it here. And your book is called Unapologetically Black, but you're also unapologetically going to ask a question whether or not you like it or not, and expect a good answer, right? And the honesty and critiquing of that is, of people and what they're saying, is huge. We don't necessarily find the raw attention to the detail that we need in order to get information. There's a curiosity about you that I think goes beyond most people patience to think that long and wide. But I think you have people that are around you that are as inquisitive as you are. And
you know what I like about you, Marcia?
Oh dear.
It's not that you're beautiful.
Oh dear. She old. Go ahead.
Oh no, I love beautiful women. Mm-hmm. It's not that you're well traveled, because you've lived all over the world. It's not that you are a journalist and you've had your own radio show, not just here in Baltimore, but in Harlem, up at Columbia. It's not that. Do you know what I really admire about you the most, Marcia Jews?
No, I don't.
It's I think you carry it behind your right ear, the razor blade.
Y'all don't believe me. That's too hard to try to. I got to have it closer. Go ahead.
Any final thoughts for today?
I want everybody who hears this to go to the places I ask you to visit. On Google, I want you to read Falling Through the Net by Larry Irving. I want you to read that, really read it, and what it actually says about who we are and what is expected with this digital divide business in 2021. I want you to please go to the Intelligent Community Forum. I want you to read everything. I want you to write them emails. If you don't understand something, have them explain it to you. And then I want you to be able to sit down and to send Donnie or myself some sort of email, or contact us on Facebook and tell us what you think. And we need to then make sure that all of our council people, our people in the state and federal agencies, they understand that we need to change the trajectory of what's going on in our community here in Baltimore and every community across this nation. It is past time for us to change children's lives. And it's unconscionable that people are sitting there talking about buying Rolls Royces and all this, and our children don't have access to the internet. And we need to do whatever is necessary, by any means necessary, to get all of our children on the internet with a computer and ready, willing, and able as an American to have access to the internet and to learn.
I would just add to that, Marcia, it makes no sense to put your child in a $200 belt, in $200 tennis shoes, in all of these accoutrements of pseudo success when they don't have access to the internet
or a computer.
It makes no. Who cares if you have 1 million followers if the young people around you are uneducated? Lauryn Hill said, in my travels all over the world, I've come to learn that what differentiates one child from another is not ability, but access. Access to education, access to opportunity, access to love. You've been watching the BlackUSA.News morning show. I'm Donnie Glover here with Marcia Juice, and we will catch you tomorrow.
Good day.